Section 2 then talks about the policies to maintain basic services and city operations. Here, item number 6 is where you see just the restatement of the intent to hold the current mill levy rates constant at 10.326 in the general fund and 1.045 in the debt service fund for a total mill rate of 11.371. Holding general fund balances steady at $1.3 million, with excesses being used to build back reserves. An increase in the solid waste utility rate from $10.09 per month to $13.59 per month. A decrease in personnel expenditures by $200,000 and a decrease in contractual and commodity expenditures by $100,000. Final details on that to be brought back to the council as we complete the balance of this year and negotiate employee benefit packages. The maximum expenditure limits that were published reflect that $300,000 decrease in general fund expenditures. So we will be working between now and December 19th for final approval and recommendations on what constitutes that $300,000. Funding of existing vehicle and equipment leases and deferring all other equipment and vehicle needs, maintaining the franchise and mill rate rebate program, maintaining the cost recovery goal in the Parks and Recreation Department. And then Section 3 was the direction from the governing body to pursue the following areas as part of future budget considerations, and that includes exploring possible partnerships, developing options for establishing building reserve funds for city facilities, and presenting a plan that shows how the gateway stormwater reimbursements will be distributed to build back reserves in the general fund and retire long-term stormwater debt. So as a part of our annual budget process, then typically the budget resolution would advance to the city council meeting next week, would be considered. The actions that would be required in addition to passage of the budget resolution would actually then be a formal vote on the budgets for the city. So you approve the resolution and then you would adopt the budget for the city, Rock Creek Drainage District 1, Rock Creek Drainage District 2. If you do increase the mills in the drainage districts, there will be one additional resolution that would be required by state law that attests to an increase in tax revenues. It will not apply because the value of the property contained within Rock Creek Drainage District has decreased so much that increasing from 10.5 to 15.5 actually generates less in property tax revenues than we did. But that's not the case in Rock Creek Drainage District 2. So it's a state requirement that we would pass that resolution just attesting to that increase. So there would be potentially 5 actions related to the budget on next week's council agenda.
All right, that's a great setup and an overview of the resolution. I want to start with committee members, Amy, Pat, and Debbie, in terms of comments, questions, either for the committee or that Laura might be able to answer.
In the resolution, it specifically calls out a $300,000 decrease in personnel expenditures and $100,000 decrease in contractual and commodity expenditures. And in the general fund summary, if you look from 2012 to 2013, I don't see a $200,000 change or a $100,000 change combined in those line items. And I'm sorry, that may be a misunderstanding. What we did is we took the original 2013 budget that was presented at the beginning of our budget process this year, which the personnel, so it was a decrease over that original. So if the intent was a decrease from 2012 to 2013, we do need that additional clarification. But that's how we interpreted that decrease from what was originally presented to the figures that you see here. That's where you'll see those reductions.
So just for clarification, in reading this, I would assume that this is a decrease in expenditures by $200,000 from, it would just seem to me that this would be based on the final year 2012 budget, or even to go so far as to the resolution that was adopted in the budget that was adopted in 2012. So that's the way I've always personally read this, is that it was a year-over-year decrease from 12 into 13, not from an original budget we saw for proposed budget we saw for 13 to this one. So that's just my comment.
Sure. And then the other part of that too is it says final recommendation will be developed for council approval December 19th to prepare, I guess, for the entire fiscal year of 13, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So to Amy's question, additional adjustments will be made in terms of the recommendation that will be made on or before the 19th?
Yes.
Okay. So the numbers that we have in the funds right now, or the projected budget numbers, until we get this proposal or recommendation by the 19th, aren't the final numbers.
Well, that's where I think there's either we need some additional clarification, because our interpretation was a $200,000 and $100,000 reduction over what was presented originally for 13. So if that's not the council direction, then we need to be clear here, because that will change the amount. Yes, it will ultimately change the amounts, but it will also change the amount in the areas that we will be looking for, because if you want us to go back to the 2012 budgeted numbers, or you want us to go back to the original 2013 numbers.
So to simplify, yes, the 200 and the 100,000 are reflected in these numbers right here today.
Yes.
And you started, the original numbers you started with in the 2013 budget process, drafted off of the way we started, or the way we ended 12?
That looked at sort of the way our budgeting practices and policies. So for example, we would be looking at what our typical increases would be in health insurance on the personnel side, and those kinds of things. And so we presented a number that was our projection for 2013 personnel expenses, which was 6.2 million, I think, if we go back and look at that number. And so we were looking at bringing that originally proposed number down by $200,000.
And the same with the commodities as well? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Other comments? Questions for Laura? If the committee has got their questions answered, open it up to other council members.
Concerned about the reduction of personnel expenditures. That would be the reduction in compensation and benefits.
And just by way of background, we are now in our, is it third year of no increase for employees, and the fear becomes that if you can't retain your employees, then you will lose the good employees. And so, I mean, it's a constant balancing act.
Well, and you're seeing our employee net pay go down rather than up, because we're taking more for hospitalization and benefits, and I have a real problem with that. I know I'm on the committee, but that's
no. All comments are welcome.
I agree.
Either we get them out here now and talk about them, or we save them until the city council meeting, and I'd rather get them out here on the table now.
Well, and I will tell you that the $6.2 million number that was originally presented in personnel services did contemplate being able to give back raises to the employees, because that was the direction I think that we heard from the council last year. If we can start to move in that direction, we'd like to be able to do that. You know, as we've talked about before, the biggest challenge that we have is we don't get to negotiate our employee benefit package until November. And so we have to, we historically have tried to provide enough flexibility within personnel services to be able to adjust to that, to give you as a council choices in November, and then we can come down, and what we don't use, you know, rolls into fund balance. But
I think we've talked about that in the last couple of years, and I don't think we've ever given them any extra, have we? I mean, it's budget. Come to the final.
We have there now. If we finish this, if we stay on track for this year, yes, the 2012 budget did contemplate beginning to give back raises in the third quarter. We are looking at shifting everybody to one anniversary date, so that we can get through the first 3 quarters of the year and know where we are from a budgetary perspective, and set the merit matrix at that point. And that's sort of the plan that we had in place when we put the personnel numbers together for 2013 as well. So
they would be looking for some kind of bonus in the third quarter of this year.
A merit increase, yes.
Okay. And can we?
And is that merit increase one time, or does that stay with them?
And the merit increase would be an increase to their base salary.
Okay.
Can we put that in here so that we know it's gonna happen? It just concerns me because I know we're losing people and I see these public works guys out here working maintenance and they are working their heart and soul out to keep our streets going. And I just think it's sad when you see their salaries go down rather than up, and I don't know how we can continue to do that. I would just like to make certain that we have something in there that's gonna say they're gonna get that.
I mean, we can make this budget resolution reflect anything we want it to reflect, and, sometimes these are, as we've discussed, Lauren, sometimes these become goals that we attain, and sometimes they become goals that we don't, but they at least provide a mark out in the future for us to try and hit. So, I mean, if there is the interest, we certainly can add language to that speaks to what you're talking about, and would ask, if there is. What I would prefer to do is figure out what that language might look like this evening and make that part of the recommendation if the committee is so inclined to do that, as opposed to amending our resolution when we get to city council meeting on Wednesday.
I think the other option that you have is if this is an appropriate dollar amount reduction that you want to see in the general fund budget, do you want to be specific between personnel services and contractuals and commodities? Or if you're going to see proposals that come back over the next several months, do you want to set a dollar reduction and have us, bring back, here are the pieces, and you can put these pieces together to achieve $300,000 in savings?
But if we don't get all this until the fourth quarter, then how do we figure that for the third quarter, for their merit raises?
Well, we'd have to.
We're not going to be able to figure out what our expenditures are going to be for 2013 until the fourth quarter of this year, right? Benefits.
Correct.
Right.
So then we won't know what the fund balance is until then, probably. Or will we?
Well, we'll have a 9 months worth of data that we can project from and be pretty close.
Mr. Andre.
Yeah, I want to backtrack this conversation because I want to make sure I'm tracking along with what we said. The first thing, I want to start where you just ended and work backwards. You said the third quarter of this year you had contemplated merit increases. That's what I thought I heard you say. So that's the 2012 budget.
Correct.
And let's be clear, that's what we passed as a council,
Yes.
right?
Yes, that's the budget we passed a year ago. And so this budget resolution here tonight does or does not impact what you plan to do with the 2012?
No, our hope is still to be able to give, when we put the budget together in 2012, I think we heard the council say if there's a way to begin to build back some modest merit increases for employees, we feel like that's an important goal. And so as we've looked at the needs that we have in our performance review systems and talked about, how do we best control that and manage that, part of that is shifting everybody to one review date. So you're able to get to the third quarter of the year, you have a sense of where your budget is, and you can set your merit matrix based on that performance and the impact. Your rates for the next year for KPERS and KPNF. So you have a pretty good projection, on into the next year.
Okay.
And then again, you would continue so that you're really looking at this potential increase in costs, just then picking up in the third quarter of 2013 again.
Okay, so
it provides a little bit more control in terms of managing those personnel costs for you and for us in reaction to where our revenues and expenditures are.
So since we're currently in the third quarter of the 2012 budget, staff is working through that process that's already been put in motion through last year's budget approval. And
Right.
You're saying that hopefully by the end of this quarter, you'll know what those increases are,
Right.
which then will allow you to feed in the numbers for the 2013 budget, which we will pass in December,
Right.
and will help you sort through the $200,000.
Right.
Okay, that helps me on that point. So Amy brings up a good point.